Hey everyone, my name is Pradeep Banavara. I'm a principal architect at the Client Services Group in Aerospike. So today I'm going to talk about getting started with Aerospike Enterprise on Docker. All right, let's get going. Let me share my deck. Okay. Some of the key takeaways from this talk will be focusing completely on Docker, using the enterprise container, getting it up and running on your host machine. Then we will see how to connect from other client applications using our client libraries to this container. And we'll also look at composing Aerospike Enterprise Container and your application image into one cohesive form, one cohesive image. Okay, we use something called Docker Compose there. And of course, we'll look at monitoring and troubleshooting server behavior, just like how you would troubleshoot your server on a bare metal server. Of course, we're going to use Docker as the primary building block for all these operations, and our focus is going to be on speed. We want to be able to just start Aerospike in like a command or two and get going with our regular developer activities and not focus too much on installing Aerospike and any of the other installation activity, okay? Quick background, why containers? I guess most of you know all this, and I won't go too deep into this. One of the most popular technologies in the DevOps world to come up in the last 5 to 6 years. It's perhaps the quickest means to deploy and distribute applications today, hands down. There is no better alternative other than containers. I mean, we think of containers as lightweight virtual machines. And I think given my developer background, the closest analogy I can find out is Apache virtual hosts, where you define a virtual host on your Apache server so that each virtual host acts as if it's its own server, right? Same concept here, but extended down to the operating system level. What this means is that I can run multiple containers on a single machine. Each of them is isolated. It runs like its own machine. And I can also distribute these containers over multiple machines, giving enormous scalability advantages. And Docker is perhaps the most popular container out there. It almost goes synonymous that Docker is container, or container is a Docker. It's a super simple process to actually build a Docker container. You would fundamentally use what is known as a Docker file and build a Docker image. And now you push this Docker image to a repo, just you would like how you push your code to a GitHub repo or a GitLab repo. And now anyone can pull this image and deploy if this is a public repo. You can also have private repos, which are open only to your organization or only to your group, so that you have a secure deployment mechanism, okay? And also you can compose multiple images into one single cohesive Docker image, okay? Okay, our enterprise container is hosted on Docker Hub. This is like a public repository where everybody can pull or download the image and run it. However, it needs a license file. So you need to sign up for our license file. We have an evaluation license that will distribute to all interested parties. So I've given the sign up link here. You can sign up and one of our account execs will ship you a license file. It's called features.conf. And once you have that, download it into one location on your laptop or desktop, give resource permissions for that directory in Docker, and you're set. All you need to do is just run this command. Briefly touch upon what this command means. It means that I'm running this particular container image. I'm giving it a name. This name can be anything. I'm mapping the ports from the container to my host machine. So these are the ports on which, these are the ports that Aerospike uses. So 3000 is our client port. So I'm exposing the container ports on the host machine using the -v parameter. And then I use the -v to map my host directories to my container directory. So I'm mapping opt Aerospike on my host machine to opt Aerospike etc on the container. So Whatever is there in opt Aerospike will now be visible under opt Aerospike etc and inside the container. So when I give the feature key file parameter to Aerospike, I give opt Aerospike etc features.conf. This will start the container, and then you could use Docker PS to find the status of the container. And once you have a container up and running, can you actually change the configuration? You can actually go inside the container and then edit the conf file, change it. But the easier option is to have a config file on your host operating system so that I can just run this every time I make a change in the config file. I'm essentially doing the same thing as before, using -v to map my host location to the container location, using a feature key file. And now I'm also giving a config file. This is what our runtime takes as a parameter, and I'm giving the config file aerospike.conf. Okay. Once you have the server up and running, you can use AQL to connect. If you already have AQL installed on your laptop, that's great. I doubt anybody will. So if you don't have AQL installed, you can run Docker from, you can run AQL from the Docker container. The only caveat is, if you run AQL from a Docker container, you need to connect to the IP address of the Aerospike enterprise container, the internal IP. So two Docker containers communicate with each other on their internal IPs, not on outside IPs. Okay. So here we have this Docker inspect, which will pull out all the parameters of the container, and we are only interested in the IP address, which is why we look for only that, extract that particular parameter, and connect to that parameter. That's it. In 2 commands, we are up and running. Now you can insert records, show sets, show namespaces, do all the regular Aerospike operations. We also have all the supported commands in our tools. You can use any of these commands instead of AQL. So substitute AQL for any of these commands and you're good to go. Okay, great. Now let's come to some client applications. Let's say you have a web app that you're writing, and you're going to use Aerospike to store profile information, user profile information. This is one of the most popular use cases for us in Aerospike. Typically, you do this, you write your client application, then you connect to Aerospike, a location either on the cloud or in your laptop. But then when you want to port your application to a test environment, you have to either recompile your client app because the IP address of Aerospike changes, or your port number changes. So we don't want to do any of these, right? We don't want to just, we want to just be able to take our application and just push it and run it in any environment without making a single line of code change. Other than bug fixes, of course. So what we're going to do is, we'll show you how to do this. First, you build a base image for your client. Okay. This is a base image that I'm going to build. I'm going to use Python 3 as my rock bottom layer because my application runs on Python. I'm going to install all the Python dependencies. I'm going to use Flask, which is the most popular web framework on Python. I'm going to use request library for accessing all HTTP requests. I'm going to, of course, use Aerospike Python client library to access Aerospike database. Okay. And now I'm going to expose these on a root work directory inside the container. I'm going to copy all my files into this work directory. I'm going to expose port 5000. Since Flask runs on 5000, I want to be able to interact with this port from outside the container from my host machine. I'm going to expose this port. Then I'm going to run Python client.py. Right? This is the command that you specify for the container to run once the container starts. Once you have that ready, you're now going to use that we are going to use Docker Compose to compose that into with Aerospike client, a client image. Sorry, with Aerospike server image. So I'm going to use Aerospike enterprise server image. Everything is the same as before. We're going to expose my host operating system, opt Aerospike on opt Aerospike EDC, same ports. And then this is the command that we use, ASD, giving the config file aerospike.conf. You might be noticing that I'm not giving any license file here. That's because inside the configuration file, I have already specified where the license file is. Okay. And once you have this, you run Docker Compose up -d. It will start both the images and you're good to go. For whatever reason, if you make changes in the source files, you can use Docker Compose build so that the source files are again rebuilt and pushed again into the container. This is not an automatic process. I know it's painful because we keep making a lot of changes. Every time you make a change, you need to use Docker Compose build. It's going to take like 2-3 minutes. It adds delay, but this is what we have to live with. Okay. So once you have all that done, you can use basic troubleshooting commands. Docker PS lists all active containers. PS -a lists all active and passive containers running or otherwise on your machine. Docker logs will show you the logs. And then if you want to go inside and examine what's going on in a container, you can use Docker exec. Okay. With that, I think I'm almost done. Before we jump into Q&A, let me kind of give a quick demo and then show you what it looks like so that this doesn't just look like all talk and no show, right? So let's go inside. I typically have some containers running. So let me stop and remove all these containers. Okay, and then let me see if I have any other container running. I do have Aerospike tool, so I'm going to remove that as well. Okay, now we are on a clean slate. I have Docker running, so I'll just quickly show you the Docker dashboard. So let's quickly see the resources. So I've mapped the resources here. If you see file sharing, I have opt Aerospike map. And if I do ls on opt Aerospike, I have features.conf. I have opt Aerospike, aerospike.conf. Okay. And what else? All right, so we can now run the container. So just so that we are running the exact same command, I'm just going to copy paste this command and run it. Okay. I have it running. I do Docker logs. You can see the logs that the process is running fine. No exceptions or no errors. And I can, in fact, now since I have this running, let me run the tools command. Did you notice that I'm not using the daemon mode? I'm just using the interactive mode because I want to interact with Aerospike on AQL. So if I do show sets, there won't be anything. There'll be just one namespace, which is a test namespace. Okay, now let's see how I can interact with the client application on this container. So Docker PS. I have the Aerospike container running. It is running on port 3000 on the host machine. Okay, I have a simple Java application here. Okay, where I'm just writing a few records and reading a few records. Just writing, 10 records and then reading all of them back. So let me just run this real quick. Yeah, so it's showing null, null, null because I'm using different parameters to enter the records and different parameters to read the records. Now, if I again run my tools, Docker PS, and say, if I stay Docker start, see, now I didn't get the AQL prompt because it's going to start it as a daemon by default, I think. So let's stop this. Not sure what's going on there. So this kind of gives you an idea of what all, even though we want to say that it is like super straightforward to get all this done, but it is in reality, you end up jumping through a bunch of hoops. So let's stop this guy. Okay, Docker R, remove this guy. Now again, I'm going to start the AQL command. Okay, now if I show sets, so I have a set, right? Start from test.myset. I should be able to see the records. Okay, so this is how straightforward it is. Please notice that here I'm using 0.0.0.0 to connect. I can also technically use the localhost IP. So I'm not totally sure on this, but let's just give it a shot. What the heck? Yeah, it works. So this is how straightforward it is to access from a client application. Now let's quickly go through the compose Docker composition. Okay, so this is my directory where I have the Python web app. This is what the Docker file looks like. Same as what I had shown before. And the Docker compose YAML file looks like this. It's a bit finicky on syntax, so you have to be a bit careful. Okay, and now all you need to do is, I believe, Docker compose up -d. So it says it's an error because cannot start service Aerospike, driver failed programming, external connectivity, blah, blah, blah. So I believe we need to first do Docker build dot. So this is going to take a while. Hopefully, oh yeah, that was pretty fast. And then let's do this again. Again, there is an error. Encountered errors, cannot start, port is already allocated. So all we need to do is Docker PS, Docker stop, Docker RM, just to be on the safer side. Then now just do okay, it's done. Both our images are built. So if I do a Docker PS, now you see only one image is running. There is some dependency issues with Docker Compose. So I think if I just run Docker Compose up -d again, the Python image is also running now. So Docker PS, both the entry points are running. So what does this client application actually do? Let's just quickly go to SRC. So all that it is doing is, I'm just inserting some dummy record, name and value. That's pretty much it. So this will work. There's no need to demo this. If you want, I can just see curl -x post gdp 0.0.0/5000. Oh, that's interesting. Failed to connect to port 80. Oh, what a mistake. Come on. Okay, there you go. And now if I do yeah, the name and record is done. Yeah, so this is how it works. So you have now two application containers. It's all composed, all good. And some basic troubleshooting I've already shown. You can also do Docker exec -it. So if I do a Docker PS, I have the containers, so I can do Docker exec -it container ID, and then /bin bash. Now I'm inside the container. You want to see where Aerospike, etc Aerospike. So here we can see the conf. Obviously, I'm not using this conf, using a different custom conf. And then you can essentially go around the container and look at all the other locations as well. cd/var log. Yeah, so no logs here. Yeah, so that gives you an idea on how to get things going. So that brings me to a wrap. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, pradeep@aerospike.com or on Twitter @pbanavara. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate you spending this time with us today. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Okay. Hey, everyone, this is Pradeep. I'm just taking a few questions. Here are a couple that I'm going to read out, and then I'll read the answers as soon as I read out the question. So the first question is, how are tools such as AQL invoked once it is part of a composed image? Okay, so let me explain the compose concept a little bit more. Probably what I said gives the impression that somehow when you use Docker Compose, you're going to like take 2-3 images and then there is one gigantic image that comes out. That's not true. So what Compose is, and I'm sorry if I gave this impression. So what Compose is, it is a way of streamlining multi-image deployment. So it from a convenience standpoint, you can do things with one command what would otherwise take like 5-6 commands. So it is not going to like create a super large image out of multiple images. So if you were to use AQL in one of the images that you were using in Docker Compose, if you're exposing the AQL command when you run the image, you will always be able to access AQL from when you compose that image with another application. But if you don't expose AQL as your run command and you don't expose the port, then it will just run like a background service without being exposed, like how I had showed it in my talk. Hope that answers that question. Next question is, what pre-built Aerospike images are available on Docker Hub? Okay, so we have a whole ecosystem. One is our enterprise ecosystem and also our community server, right? So we have the community server hosted on Docker Hub as well. Just like the enterprise server, you can download the community server and run it. No difference. It doesn't require a license file, so it's probably much simpler to run. And we also have the connect ecosystem, the connector ecosystem hosted on Docker. We have connectors to like Kafka, both inbound and outbound, JMS, Spark, Presto. These connectors are also available on Docker. And also we have a whole Kubernetes setup. We have Kubernetes operator. So all the components of the Kubernetes operator also are available on Docker. Then our Prometheus monitoring stack is available on Docker. If you have not used our Prometheus monitoring stack, that's our de facto standard now to do monitoring. Our AMC has been made open source. I don't know, and I'm not sure if AMC is still available on Docker. I think, yeah, AMC is also available on Docker. So yeah, we have a whole ecosystem available on Docker Hub, which you can download and install. Okay, the next question is there a limit on how many Docker images can be composed into a single image? There is no limit, and like I said, so we don't compose multiple images into a single image. We just like streamline the image deployment using Docker Compose. And I don't believe, at least I don't know of any theoretical limit on these images. I've witnessed like at least 6 to 7 images being used in composition in Docker Compose. The next question is, are there any guidelines from a resource perspective? From an Aerospike standpoint, we don't have any specific guideline because typically resource management is at the Docker level, not at the container level. So if you, when you install Docker for Mac, you can, in the Docker dashboard, you can set your resource allocations that Docker uses on the host machine and the host operating system. That's all there is from a resource management standpoint. In a container, or even when you're using Docker Compose, we don't have any guidelines or recommendations on resource management. Okay. So those were some of the questions I had. Are there any other questions that I can take? Or you can. Sorry, could someone please repeat that? I could just hear like the last 2 words.
Pradeep, I don't think there was a question.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my bad. Okay, so I just got a notification that we have 3 minutes left. So I'm more than happy to hang out here for 3 more minutes and answer any questions, or even longer if needed. Okay. If there are no further questions, probably we can wrap up. Thank you, everyone. This was an amazing experience, and thank you for attending Aerospike Summit.